So now that the Forgotten Hero collection has officially been released, I thought we would go through all the cards because I didn't do any like preview video analysis since it was going to be such a small set, and thought we would anyway just go through the cards, talk about where they might see play, power level, basically typical review stuff, right? So we're going to go ahead and do the attributes first, starting with Strength. For Strength we have Cradle Crush Giant. This is a 6/4 for 6, and it has a summon of deal 2 damage to all other creatures in this lane. Now, this is basically the big brother to Skaven Pyromancer. Skaven Pyromancer has long been a tool to help combat early aggression, certainly really good against token decks. This does a little bit more damage. Unlike Skaven that has a 2/3 body, this one has a 6/4, so this has also got a little bit more aggressive of a body. And overall, I really like this card. I am likely going to try this out in a number of mid-range decks and potentially control decks. I've actually been thinking about how I can try either like Warrior Control or Crusader Control, because while this isn't Ice Storm, it's pretty close. And for decks that would traditionally want Ice Storm, you might be able to get away with not running them. Specifically, you know, Control Mage has long been something that you would run because you have access to like the Willpower Hard removal and the life gain, and then like Ice Storm and Firebolt and things like that. Crusader, you could now potentially run things like Skaven Pyromancer, Cradle Crush Giant. You could run like Fell the Mighty if you want on top of the other Willpower Hard removal. You still get like Rapid Shot. So it's something that I think I want to test. I'm certainly going to test it in decks like Merrick as well. So like when I say Merrick, I mean like the more traditional like combo-oriented Merrick. But I could see this played in a lot of different decks. It's just a really good tool for helping you control the board while also giving you a pretty solid body. Like I said, I could see this even being played in mid-range decks just because it does just that. It controls the board. I'm a big fan. I like Cradle Crush. I think this will see play. I don't know where it's going to ultimately find the home, but this is one of the cards that has spinned up my creativity more than some of the others that we're going to see. So Cradle Crush I like. Next up is Doppelganger. This is a 5-cost 1/1, but when you summon it, you transform it into a copy of another friendly creature. Now, there are some important things to note. This will trigger summon effects of the creature that you copy, but it will not become an exact copy if that creature has been buffed. So it does not copy items, it does not copy just general buffs, right? Like if you play Galen on something and then you draw one of the like souped up Galen copies, this will only make a base copy of the creature, but it does trigger summon effects. So Shrieking Harpy, Manticora, right? Both ends of the spectrum, things like that. This will trigger those. So I also really like this card, and I want to try to find some good quality ways to abuse it, but I haven't figured out what the right place for it is. Certainly, like Control Mage has things like Manticora, Marak, Iron, some good targets there. I think that this is also potentially really good in something like Alter Assassin, just because of the summon effect. I think that it has potential in something like mid-range Mage, where Mage typically doesn't have a lot of like good quality 5-drops. It used to be Thief of Dreams, but after the nerf, that's not really the case. So while like your Prophecy mid-range Mage, for example, would run something like Piercing Javelin because of the Prophecy, the rest of the 5 slots aren't necessarily super great, and running Doppelganger is something that I can totally see. Like you can use it to copy a Fate Weaver, you can just use it to copy even just something as silly as Hive Defender, right? Like Hive Defender is just good enough that copying it isn't necessarily wrong. It's not a flashy use of the card, but certainly something that I don't see any problem with. I don't think that this is going to end up being like a hard like meta card, however, unless we find something that it is really comboing with that you really want to copy. So I think that's going to determine how often you see Doppelganger played, because in most cases, like if you need to run a card, you probably run it because it's not just really useful, but you also need that slot in your curve, for example. And so yeah, also because this is friendly, right? Transform Doppelganger into a copy of another friendly creature. It's not really helpful on an empty board. So there is also that aspect as well. I don't know. This is one of those cards that I think that you keep an eye out for future card releases, but in the current state of things, I don't think it's going to see a lot of play. So I would earmark this one for later. Next up, we have the card that Justin Larson and I previewed on the podcast, and this is Cast into Time. Banish a creature and all creatures from your opponent's deck with the same name. This is very much a control tool, and I mean, Banish is really useful. Getting rid of annoying things like Sower of Revenge that you don't want to see over and over again, or like Bone Daddy. Definitely useful, especially as a control deck. The biggest problem with this is that it's competing with like Piercing Javelin for a slot, so I don't think that you drop Javelin. I think that the Prophecy is too important, especially for a control deck. You want that extra free tempo if you can take it. That means Cast into Time is likely going to be like a 1 or a 2 of. I could totally see some decks that just decide to run 3 Javelins and 3 Cast into Times. I don't necessarily think that's wrong, but I think you're more likely to see this as a 1 or a 2 of, just kind of like flex play, niche case type thing. Very powerful effect. But the thing about the banishing all creatures from the opponent's deck is you have to remember it doesn't remove things from the graveyard, and it does not remove things from the hand. So it's only going to take away things that are in the deck. You also have to remember that that ability only matters the longer the game goes. If the game ends up being short and they never would have drawn those cards anyway, then you didn't gain anything from the secondary portion, right? So like Cast into Time really only shines when the games go long and your opponent would have otherwise drawn into the second or third copy of something. So you got to keep that in mind as well. Very powerful effect, but it's only powerful the longer the game goes. So next up we have Sly Marshblade. This is a 3/2 for 2. It has Last Gasp of draw a card if you have 7 or more max magicka. I really like this card, and yet I still can't think of a deck I want to put it in. Ramp Scout has been struggling since the nerfs. I don't think that it really fits any other place, with the exception of maybe like an Altar Assassin or something else that's Last Gasp heavy. Traditional tempo-oriented assassin lists, for example, want your more aggressive plays. You want Goblin Skulk, you want Mournhold Trader. I think the same thing can be said for your tempo-oriented scout lists and things like that. So as good as the draw card is, if you're playing an aggressive or a mid-range deck, by the time you have 7 or more max magicka, you're not really looking to draw your card, you're looking to like close out the game. So again, I think this is more of a control-oriented or ramp-oriented card, and I don't think those decks are very good right now, but much like Doppelganger, I think you earmark this for the future and keep it in mind, because I do like the card, I just don't think it fits anywhere right now. And then we have Bleakcoast Troll, which you may notice I've already made to be premium because it's good. I think this gets played in plenty of Sorcerer variants, plenty of Scout, like mid-range tempo-oriented Scout variants. I think this gets played in certain Warrior variants. A 4-cost 5/5 is just good, and then when you tack on the Slay ability, it's even better. It's just a big body. I really like it in Warrior because it's a big body that requires likely hard removal, and if the 4-drop eats hard removal and then you follow it up with something like Sower of Revenge, you're that much better off. Similarly, I like it in something like Scout, because Scout traditionally didn't have very powerful 4 drops, so this is very beneficial. Yeah, I think this card is very good. I think you can expect to see a lot of it, and you had better hope to have a game plan for dealing with it. And then we go to our neutral cards. We're going to skip the Masterwork and kind of talk about that and the other supporting pieces of that as like one go. So Namira Shrine. This is a 4-cost support, and it says at the end of your turn, if you played 3 cards this turn, draw a card. Now, this doesn't say if you played 3 or more cards, so without testing, I don't know if you have to get this exactly like 3 on the nose, or if it truly is at least 3 or 3 or more cards. If it's 3 or more and you don't have to worry about very exactly hitting having played 3 cards, then I think it's obviously that much better. The kind of decks that I think would want to play this would be decks potentially something like Market decks, Market Assassin, Market Archer, decks that want to run like Smuggler's Hall, things like that. Whether or not it's going to be good enough, I don't know, but I think those decks can certainly be a lot of fun. So if you're looking for something to try and test, I think that's the direction to go with a card like this. Ulfric's Uprising, 6-cost action, trigger the summon of each friendly creature. Much like Doppelganger and Sly Marshblade, I think that this is one of those cards that you could potentially earmark. I'm not sure that it's good enough right now. If I was going to run this, again, I would maybe consider something like an Altar Assassin, and I would run it as a 1-of. And that's just because usually when I play Altar Assassin, I'm playing cards that have a lot of Last Gasp effects and cards that have a lot of summon effects, because you want to take advantage of when things come into play and when they leave play when you activate your altar. So if you have a deck that has a lot of summon effects, then having this as a 1-of could be cheeky. But as like a dedicated deck right now, I'm not sure that there are enough effects to consider this. Because like really, when you think about it, you need multiple creatures with summon effects in play for this to really shine, because otherwise you would just want to run Dragon Priest Mask instead. So you kind of already have to have a board presence. This almost feels like a win more card, but again, I think you kind of just keep your eyes on it, maybe brainstorm it a bit, and then kind of see where that goes. Next up is Telvanni Conscription, 11-cost action, but you summon 1 of each creature from your deck that costs 2 or less. This card is hilariously good post Journey to Sovngarde. It is a bomb. So you can already run a fair number of 2-drops to obviously help your curve and stabilize, but then when you pair this with Journey to Sovngarde, it is insane. I've seen people run a lot of charge creatures and then hope to journey and then play Telvanni Conscription to get a huge amount of burst damage. I've seen a bunch of people run things like Wordcrafter and Shrieking Harpy and other summon effect creatures, and then again, same thing, like you play Journey and then you play Conscription and you kind of just win if they don't have an answer. I think this is definitely the card that you pair with Journey. I don't think there's enough good 2-drops to just not plan on Journey to Sovngarde being the win condition with this. I don't think you run this as a 3-of ever. This is likely a 1 or a 2-of, because again, you don't really want to play it until post Journey. But it is a lot of fun. I'll say that. And so next up is the Unique Legends, and this is a trio, and I saved them for the end because they're basically all supporting the same deck archetype, and that is the Singleton deck. That's because all of these have the caveat of if you started the game with no duplicate cards in your deck. All 3 of these, so Set's Masterwork, Mordecai the Deathless, and Siege of Stros Mackay all have that requirement. Set's Masterwork is a 3-cost ongoing support that says your cards cost 1 less. So this is quite the ramp effect. Mordecai is a 5/5 for 5, but its summon ability is you gain 5 health and restore a rune. This is a very powerful effect, and it's even more powerful if you have flicker effects. So A Night to Remember, Dark Rebirth, Close Call even. If you soul tear this, etc., etc., you can get a lot of value out of this. And then what I think is the only like real payoff to the Singleton archetype, not that the other 2 cards aren't powerful, Siege is a massive tempo play. It is a 10-cost action. However, you play a random creature, item, support, and action from your deck. Now, even though it's random, you can usually narrow your choices down. So like if you run Set's Masterwork and like 1 other support card, you know you're going to have a 50-50 shot at whatever the other support card is. Same thing with items, right? If you only run like 2 items in your deck, and let's say one is like Dragon Priest Mask and the other one is something else really powerful, you know you're going to get a really powerful item out of it. Same thing with the creatures, so actions, etc., right? So the reason that Siege is such a powerful tempo play is that realistically, you're going to get the 10 magicka out of it, and likely more than 10 magicka. You know, if each of the cards you play is just 3 magicka, then you basically paid 10 to get 12 magicka worth of stuff. Again, huge tempo play. And you spent 1 card to get 4 out of your deck, and that's not even counting the other effects. So this is a massive, massive card if you can get it and draw it. Now the downside is that it's a unique, as is Mordecai, as is Set's Masterwork. So you have to lower the overall consistency of your deck in order to hopefully get the payoff of these. Yeah, it is. I don't know if it's going to be good enough, but I've been seeing a lot of people say it's a lot of fun, so there is that. So the last one that I wanted to talk about, and I saved it for the last, Voice of Balance. This is a 4/4 for 4, but it says on summon it gets +4/+4 in guard if you have an action, item, and support in your discard pile or in play. This card is potentially really, really good. Might even end up being the best card from this mini expansion. The ability specifically in something like the intelligence class to trigger this is pretty easy. You're already going to be running actions. You're going to likely be able to easily fit in items. And again, you have to remember it's only got to be an item in play or in your discard piles. So even if it's not a dedicated item in your deck, but it's something like the dagger that you've got from Crown Quartermaster, the tome from a Daggerfall Mage, daggers from Corsair Ship, which would, cough cough, be a support card that triggers this as well. That's a pretty easy way to get that as a condition. The nice thing is it's still a 4/4 for 4 if you don't trigger the summon. And people are already playing Mystic Dragon as a 4/4 for 4 with upside, so fitting this in shouldn't be that difficult. I think the best use I've seen of this card personally so far is running this in like a sorcerer deck that focuses on traditional mid-range sorcerer cards, but then they run Voice of Balance, Corsair Ship, and Hulking Fabricant. Hulking Fabricant will trigger off of Voice of Balance. Hulking Fabricant will again trigger off of daggers made from Corsair Ship, daggers made from Crown Quartermaster. Corsair Ship will fulfill both the support portion and the item portion of this, so you will only have to have played an action in order to get the benefit of Voice of Balance. And if you're in Sorcerer, you're likely running Firebolt, Lightning Bolt, and Sorcerer's Negation, so you've got a pretty healthy source of actions. I think that this card in that deck alone is really powerful. You could also run it in like an item Battle Mage build, an item Assassin build, basically any other decks that you can like shoehorn in Corsair Ship, or again the reason I say like Battle Mage because you get like Skyforge at that point as well. This card ends up being a potential powerhouse that is at worst still a 4/4 for 4, and people are already playing those. So yeah, Voice of Balance. I would expect to see this. I think this and Bleakcoast Troll are probably fighting for the best card in the set and the ones you are the most likely to see. But there were some other fun cards in this set as well. So I want to know what you guys think. What do you guys think is powerful? What are you expecting to become meta? I also want to hear what you are excited to play with. Did you play Singleton decks? Are there other combo decks that you're playing? Are you playing a Conscription deck? Are you going to try out Uprising? You know, how are you going to use cards like Doppelganger that like I said, I think are good but not good enough right now and that you might need to earmark for later? Let me know. I'm excited. Anytime we get new cards, I want to hear how you're using them. So thanks for watching, and as always, until next time, may you walk on warm sands.